Robert Oehler. Some pronounce it Oehler, some pronounce it Oehler, some pronounce it Oehler. It really depends. What I tell friends and family, I prefer Oehler, but if you call me Oehler, just don't call me late to dinner. I'm not really funny. I'm one of those guys who typically needs a target with my humor. So post-military, I've learned to throttle that back. I really have to be cautious with my humor just because I don't like to make fun of people. I don't like to ridicule people. I like to treat everybody with, respect. But unfortunately, sometimes, my humor is dry. So that's a big portion of who Robert Oehler or Robert Oehler or Robert Oehler really is. If you're in Germany, some would say it's Oehler. If you come from Ohio or from the Midwest, it's Oehler. If you come from anywhere else, it's Oehler because it's spelled with an O-E-H. What I typically tell people is I don't care. I truly answer to everything because being the fact that I've grown up and traveled all over the world and all over the country and lived every, which place, it doesn't really matter to me. So Oehler, Oehler, whatever your fancy is, that's who I am. I want to tell better stories. That's something, it sounds easy, and the people who do it well make it look easy. Telling good stories, there are a few philosophies, one of which is never let the truth get in the way of a good story, right? So the problem with that is whose truth, and can you even define it? For me, telling, the definition of truth is pretty easy to me. I fall back on my Christian morals, and by doing so allows me to understand good from evil, but I also am not naive, and I know there's a huge middle ground. For me, telling better stories is not only telling truthful stories, but factually based stories. Being exposed into the world of academia, it's important to understand that there's life beyond Google. There's something called Google Scholar. And whenever I have an issue that's apolitical, and that's a completely different genre, because whose truth are you actually going to tell? Because there's many different truths. But in the genre of filmmaking that I am pursuing is documentary filmmaking and telling story. It's important to the storyteller to have credibility, and the credibility for me lies within fact. And sometimes you have to kind of understand that there's different version of facts. The old saying is, the victor writes the history books. That's the most factual statement that I could ever say. But they don't mean it. There's a level of truth to them. For me, I believe you listen to everyone, you bring the stories together, and you kind of have to decide on what version or versions, and you bring them together. And you do that not through second or third hand accounts. You delve into the facts in the academic databases, first-hand accounts. Now, if I was telling a story about Captain Cook, I would seek out Captain Cook's his manifest, his personal captain's log, those type of things. If I wanted to know about Kamehameha, I would go to the archives at the State's office. If I wanted to know about something about the USS Boston, I would go into the Naval Archives and seek out the archives and the logbooks of the captains or the first lieutenants. That's where you get different versions of the facts, but it allows a storyteller to bring it all together. And the last aspect of telling stories, knowing how to tell it in such a way that makes people want to take what you've said in either a short film, which is 3 to 5, maybe 3 to 10 minutes, or a longer documentary genre, which is going to be 45 minutes, and make them want to learn more, make them want to go and research more, make them want to dig into your credits and bibliography. That's success to me in telling a good story, is encouraging further learning and further education. So when it comes to storytelling and family, that's a difficult subject for me. And it's a difficult subject because I don't really have very many stories in that sense. And everybody's got family drama, but that drama prevents me from doing what I love and researching. I think the biggest aspect of my family that I might research is that someday I might jump on Ancestry.com and see where my family came from. Most of my appetite for learning has come from either my previous career in the military, my professors, and really it's kind of it. My appetite for telling story is my travels and everything I've been exposed to in academia.
Okay. Are there any social issues that are important to you that you would like to tell stories about?
So when you talk about stories that I would like to talk about, there's millions, and I think it all goes back to what made me want to tell story and talk story and be published. It's more about, for me, traveling down the path less traveled, and at the same time taking a step back and taking the time to write about it, to video document it, take photographs. For me, it's important in the sense that their stories are out there and people just don't know about them. And there's three that comes to mind right away. The first story is the homeless crisis in Hawaii. The story's been told a million times over, but there's aspects of the story that have never been told. Or if they've been told, they have not been widely publicized. Micronesia, the Micronesians that come to Hawaii, they come here and we welcome them with open arms because of what we did in World War II with nuclear testing in their home islands. Some will say that Hawaii bears an unfair burden of the refugees, or not refugees, that's probably the wrong word, the immigration from Micronesia. But historically, there are documents and agreements in place internationally that says, hey, we have to accept them because this is what we did to their homeland. In 1893, the illegal overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii, I'm very passionate about Hawaiian history. I know enough just to be dangerous, but I do know that the fact that it was an illegal coup, there were Americans involved. Grover proved it with the Grover Report. In 1993, Clinton apologized, but what now? For me, the story that I would like to tell is I'd be interested in talking about the Marines, the 250 Marines that came off the USS Boston. At what point, who knew what and when? It'd be very interesting to tell that story based off of the ship's logs, the captain's logs, the lieutenant, the senior Marine that came ashore. What did they know and when did they know it? Obviously, we know now that Ambassador Stevens was surely guilty of illegal activities. But do we know whether or not the USS Boston captain was complicit? Do we know whether or not the Marine landing force was complicit? I kind of want to know what they were thinking and tell that story. And in the end, it'd be just very interesting. The third story that I'd love to do some research on and tell is the fact that we tested nuclear weapons in space. And when you think about that, that's kind of scary. I mean, nuclear weapons in space, we didn't do that, but we did. And it's well documented. If you Google it right now, you will see, Google testing nuclear weapons in space. We actually shot missiles into space or rockets into space and detonated nuclear weapons in space. We did it because we were just curious on what would happen if that happened. If we did. Obviously, we're all here and we all survived, but it's a story that's not told. And so when you see information being presented, it's always interesting to me to see what makes someone want to research more, and that's what I'd like to figure out. I haven't figured it out. I don't know how to elicit emotion in video. I'm kind of dry, so that's as I go forth in film school, that's something I want to learn how to do, is elicit emotion through film. My best friend, amazingly enough, one of the things that I definitely can remember about high school is never being too far from my best friend Todd Weingroff. We pretty much did everything together. It was pretty amazing times that we shared, and the funny thing is with Todd is he could call me and I can call him, and it could be 6 months apart, and we'll pick up just where we left off. One memory worth mentioning about Todd is he gave me a call and said, "Hey, I'm getting married. It's going to be kind of small. I would understand if you can't be here." And I interrupted him and let him know that I would be there. So I believe I was in Florida at the time. I got on a plane, whether it be, I can't remember how long it was between the phone call and the time that I was on a plane heading towards Germany. But there I was, his best man. It was pretty awesome. And he did the same for me. When I called him and let him know I was getting married, he dropped everything he was doing, and while he was in Germany, and he flew all the way to Hawaii. So we really good friends. He's always been there for me, and he's never more than a phone call away. So am I still in touch with Todd? Absolutely. So again, like I said before, he's never more than a phone call away. He's got a wife and 2 kids and living in Germany, and I've got Jamie and living in Hawaii. So my favorite subject to study would absolutely be history. I enjoy history. One of my mentors, Pierre Aslan, I give him a lot of credit. I've got, as people would say, I've got Aslan running through my veins. So that's a coined term of endearment to a history professor. Of course, 90% of what he lectured on was his version of history, but nonetheless, it gave me the passion and the tools to study history, and it's something I enjoy. Pierre Aslan absolutely has been one of my key mentors in academia. Not only did he teach me, not only did he give me the tools to do what I need to do to research, but he also gave me a liberal version of which to chew on, and it's something that I've always gravitated to, and I think he's enjoyed having me in his classroom as much as I've enjoyed being in his classroom. He was surprised to understand that I told him about my 2 strikes rule. I would challenge him in class, twice, and then I'd back off, and I had to remind him it was his class, and I thought that any further challenging beyond 2 strikes, either I convinced him or I didn't. I think he did more convincing of me than I did of him, but there were some things worth fighting for. So what I like most about school is just the exposure to everything. What I like least about school is being exposed to everything. It never really allowed me to focus. It felt like I had a fire hose shoved in my mouth and turned it on. But I think that's what being an undergraduate is. It's being exposed to a lot and helps you determine where you want to go in the future. And for me, that's film school. So my life in academia has definitely been a success so far. Some of the extracurricular activities that I enjoy doing, I absolutely enjoy, getting out and running. I love running. I love cycling. I love swimming. Swimming is something that was a surprise passion of mine. I've always had inner ear issues, and so I kind of gave up on swimming for the longest time. And I think about 5 years ago, I was gaining some serious weight, and so I learned that throwing earplugs as deep into the ear canal as possible and getting into the ocean was a great way to lose weight. And I went from swimming 25 meters barely to open water swims up to 2.1 miles, and that's where I met my wife. what would people find surprising about me? That's actually kind of a difficult question to answer, only because I feel like I'm an open book, and that's because of my humor. I like to make a target of myself. There's not really too many things that, if I wrote a book, I think no one would be surprised about what was in it, because they already know. I think a few of the most memorable college moments for me was presenting my first production, which was Clean Water Hawaii. Someone once said, if you don't get physically ill on the first time you look at your first rough cut, you've done something wrong. And when in front of my classmates, when we did first look, from start to finish, I had that ill feeling, and that ill feeling was just all the emotions that I could possibly have felt at the same time: nervousness, excitement, a sense of accomplishment. It was the first time that I presented a story in its entirety using film, and it was something I was very excited about. So would I have taken a different academic path if I knew now, or if I knew then what I know now? The answer to that is I don't think so. I started out as an international an international studies major, and I shifted focus to cinematic productions and multimedia. And I think that was a really good move, because if it has Adobe next to it, I want to learn it. And because it allowed those set of tools allow me to tell story in a way that I could never tell any other way. Number one, my family has a huge naval tradition, going back as far as I know. My grandfather, my father, and I can remember telling my grandfather that I wasn't joining the Navy because I wasn't going to push any mop. And it's funny how, all the things that work its way out. His response to that is, well, you have to push a mop for someone. And what he was saying was, either you're gonna push the mop for someone, whether it be at McDonald's, whether it be at a Fortune 500 company, you got to start somewhere. And I just kind of wrote that off. I think that memory will always be profound for me. And then it just kind of happened. I went and I took the entrance exams for college, and I was 18, and I did very poorly on them. I didn't do very well in high school, and the military was a great way to get away from my mother. Sorry, Mom. But that's probably more true than the beat your chest, patriotic answer that most people give. I do it for the uniform, I do it for this, I do it for that. Those things all that comes with the package, that's implied. But the real truth of it is I didn't really feel like I had anywhere else to go. And so the military accepted me with open arms, like it does anyone else, regardless of background. And that's how it all started. So I think my fondest memory of being in the military was my retirement. Knowing that I served 20 years, somehow managed to live through some of the craziness of my deployments, whether they be combat or not combat. Some people don't realize you can die of stupid causes just as you can, patriotic causes. But I think by far, when I handed my mother my meritorious service medal, I handed her my meritorious service medal that I earned because she was just as much a part of my career as I was. She was the one that was home at night, for a good of those 18 years before I got married. She was the one stressing, and it's something that that was the only way I could thank her for being there for me when I needed her. And that when I handed her my meritorious service medal, that was probably one of the fondest days of my military career. So the most difficult thing about a career in the Marine Corps, I could write I could write a 20-page paper on the difficulties of being in the Marine Corps. And being put on the spot and the cameras, I think the most difficult aspect of a career in the military, in the Marine Corps, is being here to tell the story behind it. In 2005, I lost 16 members of my battalion, and that's probably the hardest thing I live with every single day is, asking myself, why am I here? What did I do differently? What did I do right? And I still question that every day. So what do I think about armed conflict? I think that it has its place. I think oftentimes there's too many hidden agendas when it involves armed conflict and the reasons why we go. Whether it be the Spanish-American War with the sinking of a ship in a Cuban harbor, or whether it be faulty premises of why we went to Vietnam and the illegal seizure of a ship that may or may not have ever happened. Whether it be faulty intel of why we went into Iraq to begin with, why we're still in Afghanistan after bin Laden's death, which is why we were there. As an academic, I question a lot of the decisions that our government makes, and I'm not naive. There are a lot of hidden agendas of why people use armed conflict, and I think it's used a little bit too often. I think it's imperative to have a strong military, but how we use that military needs to be thought through a little bit better than what we have in the last 200 years. Serving in the military for me was an absolute amazing experience. I had a lot of ups and I had a lot of downs, but I certainly respect anyone in uniform and their accomplishments while in uniform. And it's something that I can never take back. The experiences, all the intangibles, we like to call them, that come along with service is something that I will always look back upon and have positive for my, and feel good about. So what translates into the real world from my military service? I would have to say my compassion for my fellow man. I've seen what combat does and how it brings out the worst in everyone, and it makes me realize that we have it really good in the U.S. and there are some places that don't have it as good as we do. So how, other than money, how has my previous career helped me in my current life? I think the VA program of the GI Bill has done wonders for me. It has allowed me to, that benefit that I earned while in service that continues to pay dividends has allowed me to earn my undergraduate and is sending me to Orlando, Florida to Full Sail University to pursue my graduate degree in film. I think the biggest person to influence my career by far, that's a really tough question because everyone has mentors, and I could list out numerous mentors that I had in my career and in academia. But I will select two. First, I would say by far John Michael Elms, retired major from the Marine Corps. He was the first to teach me how to do research. The first day at the job, he said because I was single and I was rich, that to get on Amazon.com. So after kind of scratching my head, after him making a statement like that, he took the liberty of ordering 30 books on Amazon, and he said, "Okay, should be about another 2 weeks, start reading. And his book list was huge, and I still haven't finished all the books. But some of the information I gleaned is really set me up for my foundation. From where in academia, there's a tie for first place. By far, Professor Pierre Aslan, was another source of foundation for my love for history, and the other person who shares first place in academia with him is Professor Irwin Quest. Quest Kenley has done more for my academic life in a short 2 semesters that I can never truly express how thankful I am to what he's done for me. He's one of the few that not only understands multimedia from a business perspective, but he also understands as a professor how to teach it. And that's very rare these days. One to walk the walk and talk the talk, and he does. He absolutely does both. So my idea for myself, I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to travel and travel the paths less traveled and tell a story about it, do documentary style work, both with across the medias that I've learned to use, both with social media, blogging, and also film. And my backup plan, or maybe I might do them simultaneously, is teach. I enjoy teaching. I think the most special way that I show my love to my mother is I no less than 4 times a week do video FaceTime with my mother, and we have our experiences with my daughter. That way it allows my mom to have a relationship with my daughter, even if we live in Hawaii and they live in Florida. And then with my wife, I make sure that I tell her I love her every single day, and I do things for her that go above and beyond, whether it be taking the time to do the dishes, whether it be doing things to take things off the plate to make sure that she gets to an opportunity to be treated as an equal in the relationship. That way she gets some camera time. She enjoys being behind the camera just as much as I do. So while I'm producing film, she's editing pictures and taking pictures, and it's a way we can definitely share our experiences. I like John Adams. When it comes to political figures, I think our founding fathers are easy to gravitate to because their hearts were pure. They had their agendas as well, but for the most part, that's probably the first and last time I feel like our political system will ever be completely in tune. After that, it all depends. There's too many factors involved, but I think our founding fathers, and I think John Adams specific, had it right. I think World War II. I think World War II is important because we went to the aid of the Europeans and also Southeast Asia, in the respects that it might have been the first time that we got involved in a war for good reasons. These are really thought-provoking questions, Will. Historical figure. So what historical figure would I like to interview? I think I'd like to interview Jesus. I think that would be definitely an expose on a massive scale. It'd be, if that was the question, what historical figure, I think, Jesus, absolutely. My definition of happiness is, are the bills paid, and am I out traveling with my family and spending time with my daughter? That's my definition of happiness. Well, if you like, you can read about it in my blog, Wonderful Lives, www.wander, WANDER, and it's 14 days in a Chinese hospital. So very exciting experience and scary experience. You know, my wife and I were frolicking through China, and we caught a pneumonia. And I had a 102 temperature, and my wife had 101 when we went in. By time, one day later, I think I was 103 and she was at 102. And it's pretty exciting in the sense that we spoke enough Mandarin to get by. And they tried to give us linguists, but I didn't exactly want to pay $100 or $200 a day to have, you know, U.S. speaking doctors. So we spoke enough Chinglish to get through that period of time in the hospital, and it was a good experience. Definitely a learning experience, and read all about it in the blog Wonderful Lives. What accomplishment am I most proud of? I think I've done a lot of things to be proud of in my career and in my life, so much so I really couldn't factor in on one.
How do you think people will remember you?
If my life was a documentary film, I think it should be titled something to the effect of, figured it out. I figured out how to enjoy life, and I figured out what was important to me early on. And for me, it certainly isn't working for someone else, and it certainly is being with my family. If I had the possession of a superhuman power, which one would it be? I would like to be able to read people's minds, because it'd be a lot easier for me to go through life. My greatest hope is that my daughter succeeds to the level which I know she can. A few of the greatest lessons that I've learned in life: if you want to learn something, you have to have the desire and go out and seek it out. It's not going to fall in your lap. It's not any one book. It's not any one professor. It's not any one podcast or whose YouTube channel that you're on. It's everything. You have to soak in life like a sponge. And the way I do it is I travel and I surround myself not by like-minded people, but people who I have passionate, heated debates with, and ones that I respect afterwards. Jamie and I went to China essentially because I was getting a D in my Mandarin class at HPU. I was struggling to get through Professor Dong's class, and I realized that immersion was the best way to go about learning a language. I've learned a few languages before, and it was because I was immersed. And so I sat up in bed one night and I told Jamie that we were moving to China. And after she stopped crying, about 5 minutes later, she realized it was just going to be just a trip, and it was going to be a fun trip. And what we did was we did basically a work study with workaway.info. That website is workaway.info. And what it essentially does is they have a host in numerous different countries, and they paid our room and board. And I worked for an hour a day talking English to Chinese students, and Jamie did social media and marketing for the Yangzhou University. And they, in return, did not pay us, but they paid us in room and board. So we actually saved money being in China. We were in China for 4 months, and that's kicked off our trip from China to Vietnam. We went from Vietnam back to the U.S. and then Europe. Traveled around Europe for a little while, then went to Australia, and then I was ready and fully immersed in my Mandarin, and then ready to, and I ended up getting an A in the next language class. So I never intended to go to film school. My passion for film was going to be combined with my passion of history. I was planning to get my graduate degree in strategic studies at HPU. And then I realized that I was actually pretty good at this film stuff. and telling stories. And it's something that I've learned to love. And it just so happens that Full Sail University in Orlando, Florida has accepted me into their graduate program. So it's in line with what I really want to do, and I really want to get my MFA, Master's in Fine Arts, in film. And so that is where my family is off to next. We moved to Orlando here in about 3 months, right after graduation, after I complete my undergraduate at Hawaii Pacific University. And then the next step after that is I'll have a graduate degree from Full Sail, and future travels include possibly sailing the Caribbean and sailing back here to Hawaii. Future ideas for future travels is the world is our playground, and nothing, as long as, like I said, as long as the bills are paid and we are continuing to enjoy life, we're going to continue on the path less traveled and telling story along the way. Going to take one of the factors that people keep saying is, well, you're going to have to slow down now that you have Abigail. And I will tell you this, Abigail is going to keep me young, and she's going to get to see the world as Jamie and I know it. We've both been almost everywhere. We haven't been to Africa yet. That's definitely on the list. But our travels definitely include everywhere where people tell us that we should not go. We'll do all the production and you do all the watching. If you're afraid to go, hey, you can watch my family go, and you can pay me to do it. And the bigger takeaway from that is I'm happy to do it. Traveling, family, film, it all meshes very well together. And like I said, I think I'm going to teach, and that's down the road for me too. Whether it be, it's definitely going to be at the university level, and I think I want to pass on my passion for telling story to the next generation of filmmakers. And I think that's what my future holds for me and my family.